I think you'd agree that we're very fortunate to have a teacher like Venerable Chodron. And so we need to take care of her. And so she's resting. I sent an email to her saying, would you like to come and teach this afternoon? And she wrote back immediately and said yes. And then she wrote back again and said no. I checked in with my body and I'm really tired. So how fortunate that we had some time with her this morning. And, you know, the brilliance of her teaching style is that she really knows how to look at her own mind. And she reflects that to us so that we know how to work with our mind. That is so amazing. It's easy to just spout from a book, but it's not so easy to know how to apply the Dharma to our own lives, and she's done it, so she's a great role model for us. So let's start with our 3 mantras, and then we'll have just a little bit of breathing meditation, and really use that time, really make use of that time. We have little pockets of time throughout our day that we can actually make use of with the Dharma. When I was at the full ordination in Taiwan, there was one monk who brought this point home again and again, that while we were waiting for a meal or while we were waiting for a teacher, he would remind us to be mindful, just to bring our attention to, he was a very strong meditator on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, and he would remind us to bring our attention inside. So even with these little moments, we can make use of them. I remember Venerable was teaching on developing calm abiding at one point, and I said, Venerable, when are we going to have time to do this? And she said, well, we have 5 minutes before teaching, and we have, so she was doing the same, she was giving the same advice, which is make use of every moment. I mean, we have to be that hybrid practitioner. We can't make ourselves neurotic, making use of every single moment, unless we have developed the capacity to do that. But we can make use of more moments, can't we? And in those moments where we're sitting at a traffic light or waiting for something to happen, waiting for the tea to boil, the water to boil, whatever it is, really thinking about the Dharma, applying the Dharma in those moments. Even just thinking about dependent origination of what we're doing, that's very valid, very, very helpful. Those little drops that'll collect in the vessel. So let's start with our mantra recitation, and then we'll have a little bit of silence, and then I'll set a motivation. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Diro Mebawa Sutokayo Mebawa Supokayo Mebawa Raktu Mebawa Sarvasiddhi Mempayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuruhu Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabhava Maha Samaya Safa Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Diro Mevawa Sutokayo Mevawa Supokayo Mevawa Anuraktu Mevawa Sarvasiddhi Mempayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabhava Maha Samaya Sav Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Dino Mevawa Sutokayo Mevawa Mevawa Anuraktu Mevawa Sarvasiddhi Mempayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabhava Maha Samaya Safa Ahum Te. There's a verse in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life that says, the leisures and endowments are very hard to find. And since they accomplish what is meaningful for humanity, if I don't take advantage and accomplish benefit with them now, how will such a perfect opportunity come about again? So when we think about the life we have right now and the freedoms and fortunes that we enjoy, like the Buddha appearing in this world and giving teachings, the disciples still following the practices and gaining the results, we probably don't think of it as difficult to attain because for us it's always been here. Also, we don't think deeply about their causes and conditions. But if we really understood how difficult and rare these conditions are to attain, we wouldn't waste a minute. When we have opportunities to practice the Dharma or engage in teachings, we might be tempted to think, oh, I'll do this other thing instead. I can watch it on the YouTube or I can catch it up later. But if we knew how precious this rebirth is and how it's almost impossible to have all the conditions that we have right now, and just thinking about the lifetimes we've experienced without having access to these transformative teachings, if we really understood deeply how precious this life is, we would make sure to make good use of the opportunities we have. So right now we have the opportunity to learn about and think about karma, and we have this opportunity to purify our minds and to do that within a framework of bodhicitta. And we have a chance to establish really strong imprints to practice them again and again in the future. So again this afternoon, let's listen to these teachings, thinking that we'll take this opportunity to study and reflect and meditate so that we can develop more of our capacity to benefit others. This afternoon, I'd like to talk about the 10 non-virtues because they're guidelines to help us reflect on our life, and they point the direction of what we need to clean up and help us to see our motivation for doing the things that we do. But we haven't gotten very far in the sadhana, and I would just like to start with looking at the meaning of the mantra that we're reciting. I think it's important. Venerable often emphasizes that it's much more helpful to understand the meaning of what we recite, and especially those of you who are new, just learning this mantra for the first time, it might be helpful to know what you're saying. So let's turn to page 41. There's an explanation of the mantra. Maybe you've had a look at it. This mantra is a little bit different than other mantras. Some mantras are more like an expression or an utterance of the Buddha when they attained awakening. But this is more like an aspiration. We're making a request with this mantra. And so if we look at it very literally, then we can get a sense of what's included in it. But then we also have a summary of the meaning on the next page. So let's just look at these different pieces here on page 41. Starts with Om, and Om represents the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, all that is auspicious and of great value. Then Vajrasattva is this being who is the wisdom of inseparable bliss and emptiness. So he represents the wisdom and bliss of all the Buddhas. Samaya is a pledge that can't be transgressed. Manupalaya, lead me along the path you took to awakening. There's a nice request, isn't it? Vajrasattva dinopatita, make me abide closer to your Vajra holy mind, your indestructible mind. Dido Mebawa, please grant me the ability to have a firm and stable realization of the ultimate nature of phenomena. Wow. That's the ultimate antidote we need, isn't it? So we're requesting help with that. Sutta Kayo Mebawa, please have the nature of being extremely pleased with me, not in an erotic way, not in a, psychological way, but in a way that we're doing the practice. We're following in the footsteps of Vajrasattva. And so I think that's why he'd be pleased with us. Supakayo Mebawa, may I be in the nature of well-developed great bliss. Anurakta Mebawa, please have the nature of the love that leads me to your state. I think that's a request. Please may I have the nature of the love that leads me to your state. Sarvasiddhi Memparyatsa, please grant me all powerful attainments. We need attainments so that we can benefit others. We need to have clairvoyance and special abilities like that so that we can know what sentient beings need. Sarakarma Sutsame, please grant me all virtuous actions. Siddham Shriyam Kuru, please grant me your glorious qualities. So all the 6 perfections, the 10 perfections, enlightened activities. Hung, the Vajra holy mind. Ha 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 ho. 5 transcendental wisdoms. So when a person achieves awakening, the 5 aggregates are transformed, and the five minds, we develop these 5 transcendental wisdoms, and I think they're listed in the back. Bhagavan, one who has destroyed every obscuration, attained all realizations, and has passed beyond suffering. Sarvatathagata, all those who have gone into the realization of emptiness, knowing things just as they are. Vajra, inseparable or indestructible. Mame Mutsa, do not abandon me. As if a Buddha could. If a Buddha has developed uncontrived bodhicitta for eons, there's no way they're going to abandon us. But again, sometimes we just make these aspirations to bring the point home. Vajrabhava, the nature of inseparability. Mahasamaya Sattva, the great being who has the pledge, the Vajra holy mind. Ah, the Vajra holy speech. Hung, the transcendental wisdom of great bliss. Pe, clarifies the transcendental wisdom of inseparable bliss and emptiness, and destroys the dualistic mind that obstructs it. So there are many different summaries. I've read several, and here's one. If we were to put it all together now. O great being whose holy mind is in the indestructible nature of all the Buddhas, having destroyed every obscuration and attained all realizations and passed beyond all suffering, the one gone to the realization of things just as they are, do not forsake me. Please make me closer to your Vajra holy mind and grant me the ability to realize the ultimate nature of phenomena. Please help me to realize great bliss. Lead me to your state and grant me all powerful attainments. Please bestow upon me all virtuous actions and glorious qualities. There's quite a bit in there, isn't there? So when you're reciting the mantra, especially silently, you might turn to this page and just reflect on the meaning and really make that kind of aspiration with your recitations. Might help us to feel a little closer to Vajrasattva. Okay, so as Buddhists, we have short-term goals, we have long-term goals, and our long-term goal, of course, is to achieve awakening for the benefit of all beings. But we also have short-term goals like wanting to reduce our anger or develop our compassion, our loving kindness, patience, be a nicer person. That's a very large goal for a lot of us. But hopefully our short-term goals also include creating causes for another precious human rebirth, like the one we have now. And so this is one of the reasons that we focus so much on these 10 non-virtues, and especially focus on refraining from them, because that becomes the virtuous cause for creating another precious human rebirth. Or it's one of the causes. Actually, what's the cause for a human rebirth? Ethical conduct. And then a precious human rebirth?
Practicing the 6 parameters, prayers,
Pure ethical conduct, practicing the 6 perfections in addition to ethical conduct, and then making pure aspirational prayers. So the ethical conduct is like the substantial cause that's going to link us up with an upper rebirth, a fortunate rebirth, like a human rebirth. So again, here we're seeing this Buddhist worldview of thinking about mind as a continuum, and past and future lives. But then we'll need to practice the 6 perfections. Like, we'll need resources in our future lives, so we need to practice generosity. And we'll need spiritual companions, good companions, so that's where patience comes in. Joyous effort is something that really helps us in all the perfections. And then, of course, concentration and wisdom. We need the union of those two to develop our ultimate goal. So the 6 perfections will be important, planting those seeds and increasing them in every lifetime, and then making pure aspirational prayers to take a good rebirth so that we can continue along the path towards our long-term goal. So that's why we really hone in on these 10 non-virtues. Ethics is the foundation for our practice, isn't it? And ethics is the foundation for being able to develop concentration, and then that's the foundation for wisdom. So it's important to check if we have any leftover resistance to thinking about being an ethical person from our previous religion or our upbringing as something that we don't want to do. Venerable often talks about this. But rather to see it as, to really make that link, that ethics is the cause of our happiness. And so we want to engage in it, no matter what we call it. We can call it ethics, we can call it just being a good person, whatever you want to call it, but it's the foundation for what comes next, so it's important. So if it's the case then that practicing ethical conduct and refraining from the 10 non-virtues, so if that's the case, then practicing ethical conduct and refraining from the 10 non-virtues will be one of the most important Dharma practices we do in this life. And refraining from the 10 non-virtues is something that each and every one of us can do. I have full confidence in that. It'll take a while, but there's no reason that we can't accomplish this in this lifetime. So the clearer we are about that as a personal goal, the more likely we are to accomplish it. And so what's going to support us in being able to do that is to understand, well, what are each of the 10 non-virtues? How do we engage in them? What do we need to do to refrain from engaging in them, especially if they're strong habits? So in general, there are 3 ways that we engage in good and bad conduct: with our body, with our speech, with our mind. And although virtues and non-virtues are limitless, at least 84,000, actually there's more than that, they're limitless, and they're not necessarily included within these 10, what we're calling 10 paths of actions. These are 10 paths of actions because if all the parts are complete, they have the potency to lead to a rebirth, as well as other results. But the Buddha, in his very kind and skillful way, condensed all of these negative actions into the 10 most important ones in order to make the practice of ethics easier to understand. Isn't that kind? It's very sweet. So it's like the template. It's like everything is subsumed within those 10. And so if we train ourselves to avoid these 10, we'll easily avoid other negative actions as well. So the Buddha taught 10 paths of non-virtuous actions and 10 paths of virtuous actions. And so the 10 virtuous actions, paths of actions, or karmic paths, that's another way of translating that, are really refraining from the 10 non-virtues, refraining, the action of refraining. But also we could think of them in terms of doing the opposite of the non-virtues. So for instance, if killing is the path of action of killing is the first of the non-virtues, then one way of thinking about the virtuous paths is to refrain from killing or to actually protect life, to go the opposite, make the opposite step. So just not doing an action like killing or stealing is not necessarily virtuous. That's what Geshe Sopa was making this point in his commentary to the Lamrim Chimo. He said, for an action to be one of the 10 virtuous paths of actions, we must first know what the 10 non-virtues are, really clearly, and what their consequences are. And then based on that knowledge, use our wisdom to oppose such non-virtuous actions. So it's an informed kind of activity. It's not just something superficial. And we refrain from committing those non-virtues. So in the Lamrim text, there's lots of detail about what's involved. Like there's a basis or an object. That's one thing. We're doing the action in relation to something. And then there's an attitude, which includes a number of things, like recognizing the object that we're engaging with clearly. Like, for instance, killing, we're very clear. We have a clear recognition in our mind of an intention to kill a particular person. That's one kind of intention. But we can also have very general intentions, like mass shooters just have an intention to kill as many people as they can kill. So it depends on what's going on in our mind, but there's a clear recognition. So we're talking about complete paths of actions that will bring about the strength of mind, or the strength of a seed that can propel a rebirth. So I think the benefit of understanding this level of detail is that then when we have a question like, is it okay to put my cat down? She's suffering. Or what else do people ask? Aren't I killing when I'm eating meat? Aren't people killing when they eat meat? Shouldn't we all be vegetarian? That's a common misunderstanding. So when we understand these 10, we can go to them as our resource and know for ourselves, well, what is a complete path of action? It doesn't mean that incomplete paths of actions are karma-free, not at all. But they have a lesser potency to them. So there's a basis, there's an attitude that includes the recognition. Also there's some kind of intention or motivation, like I want to kill or I want to refrain from killing. And in terms of a non-virtuous path, then there's an affliction. And all 10 of these non-virtues can be motivated by either anger or attachment or ignorance, or any variation on those themes, like jealousy is subsumed within anger, or resentment subsumed within anger. So that's the attitude that's happening in the mind. And then the third one is the action, or the actual performance of the non-virtue or the virtue. And then the completion of that action. When the action is complete, that's when the seed or the potency is left on the mind.
Mention again.
Sure. Yeah, so the first one is the basis or object that the person or thing that's being acted upon. Then with the attitude, there's 3 parts: the recognition and the motive, like I want to kill or I want to refrain from killing. And then with the non-virtuous path of the action, there's a non-virtue, an affliction involved. So anger, attachment, ignorance. With a virtuous action, then it would be something like compassion or wisdom or generosity, or be a positive state of mind. Yeah, a virtuous state of mind. Then there's the action, the actual performance of the virtue or non-virtuous path. And then there's something that signifies the completion of that action. So if all 4 of these branches are included in an action, you can see how an action is something there are a lot of moments involved, aren't there? It's not just one short moment of a middle factor of anger or something. It's like a whole series of thoughts and actions with our body, speech, and mind. And if all 4 of those are complete, then that places a very strong seed on our mind stream. So that's the bad news if it's a non-virtue. It's the good news if it's a virtuous action. Like when we take the 8 Mahayana precepts, we're putting a really strong seed, at least one, on our mind stream for a good rebirth. Yeah, so that can be very uplifting when we think about it in those terms. Okay, so let's just walk through these. And I know many of you have heard these before. I have. And I've made a little summary for myself from the Lamrim Chenmo. And this is a great meditation tool. First of all, I'm not going to hand this out to you because it will be better if you do the extracting from a Lamrim text, because it will stick in your mind better. This is the danger of sharing charts with people. Those of you who like to make charts. But it's a very handy thing just to do a glance meditation on. Another very nice chart I made is the results of the 10 non-virtues with the results. So there are these 4 results that come with each of these non-virtues. The fruitional result is one, or the ripening result, the rebirth that an action can propel. Also, I'll just tell you what they are now. The causally concordant results in terms of the habit. Whatever we're doing now, we're getting good at it. We're creating habits for that. We will do that easily in the future. Whatever we're doing now. How many of you like to worry? Guess what we're getting good at. Also, causally concordant results in terms of our experience. So whatever we're doing, we potentially could be on the receiving end of that same action in the future. Causally concordant in terms of the experience. And then there's an environmental result that has to do with the environment that we're born into and access to food and drink, and the kind of environments that we'll find. So this also is a very sobering glance meditation to do. In fact, why don't I just read this to you? And this might be a good motivation for listening to the 10 non-virtues. So with killing, actually with all of these, the ripening result, if we do an action with great strength, well, chances are that's going to create a cause for a rebirth in hellish realms. Okay, whether you believe in those or not, hellish experience, we could think of it in those terms. Medium strength could propel us to a hungry ghost realm where we don't have access to food and drink. And then a lesser strength could propel us to an animal realm. Have you thought very much about the fact that our mind stream is non-material, right? It can be propelled into any type of body, any size of body. Even a small insect, it's got a mind. So that goes with all of the 10 non-virtues. But with killing, the causally concordant result that's in terms of experiences, we'll have a short life with sickness and disease. Or we'll have a liking for killing at a young age. I started out as a dental hygienist, and I remember one day a little boy came in and I was to clean his teeth, and he was dressed in fatigues, army fatigues. And the whole time I was cleaning his teeth, he couldn't have been more than 13 or 14, but the whole time I was cleaning his teeth, he was talking about killing. It was scary. Yeah. And then the environmental result of killing is food, drink, medicine, and crops have little power or induce illness. Most beings around you die before reaching a full lifespan. So we can use this kind of information when we watch the news, when we read the news, we think about people in different situations. Again, not as a you deserve this sort of attitude, but out of compassion, thinking, well, there were causes for this, and how wonderful if they could be free of these causes. And may I purify my mind so that I never am on the receiving end of these kinds of experiences. Okay, with stealing, the causally concordant result in terms of experience is that you will lack material wealth and possessions and have to share with others. In terms of the habit, you like stealing and making others steal, even at a young age. Environmental result, few crops, you'll have few crops and fruits, bitter frosts and hail will damage crops, and you can't accomplish what you want. So these aren't an exhaustive list of the results, but it's a ballpark that can give us an idea. Unwise and unkind sexual conduct, particularly here we're talking about adultery. The causally concordant result in terms of experience is that we'll have an unruly spouse, and helpers are untrustworthy. An unruly spouse, you can imagine what that means. Your partner's not faithful, maybe. I remember when we were studying this at Dharma Friendship Foundation in Seattle, there was one woman in the group who said, "Oh, now I get it. Now I know why my husband is the way he is." Causally concordant habitual result is the tendency to be unfaithful in relationships with a spouse. Okay, so the things that we experience in our life have causes. The environmental result is that you live in a dirty, filthy, smelly, and unpleasant environment. So those are the three non-virtues we create with our body. Then there are four that we create with our speech. And these are probably the ones, well, I don't know, we have to check for ourselves, but these are probably the ones that we are involved with more often than not. So the first one is lying. And the causally concordant result, similar to the experiences, others will not believe you. Others will slander and deceive you. Anybody been on the receiving end of others' slander and thinking, where is this coming from? We'll have a tendency towards lying speech from a young age. And the environmental result is there will be many cheats about and no harmony among workers. You will be fearful and have many reasons to be afraid. Actually, all of the four verbal non-virtues have this as one of their environmental results. And I think about the level of anxiety that is prevalent in our culture now. You know, that's a kind of fear. We have many reasons to be afraid. I don't know, it's just some connection I made. Then divisive speech. A causally concordant result in terms of experience, you will lose friends or have few friends, and helpers will not get along. I read in one Lamrim text that feeling lonely is a result of divisive speech. And that really got my attention. It really inspired me to clean up my speech because I spent a lot of time in my younger years feeling lonely. The habit is a tendency for divisive speech, even at a young age. Remember cliques we used to be in? And were you in cliques when you were in grade school? Ditching somebody? Did you ever ditch a friend? Get all your friends to gang up on somebody? The environmental result of divisive speech is you will live in a place where the ground is uneven, difficult to traverse. You will be fearful and have many reasons to be afraid. And then harsh speech, the causally concordant result, similar to the experiences, others will speak ill of you. And will have a tendency for harsh speech, even at a young age. The environmental result is we'll be born in a place with many trees, stumps, and brambles, thorns. The place is drab, arid, salty, barren, with dangerous animals. You will be fearful and have many reasons to be afraid. Australia. It's not the only place that's drab and arid and salty and barren. Yeah, many dangerous animals. Yeah. And then idle speech. The causally concordant result in terms of experiences, your words will carry little weight. We won't be listened to. We will lack confidence. Ugh. That's the opposite of what any of us would want, especially when we're trying to help people with the Dharma. We need people to listen to us and to have confidence in what we're doing and saying. So this is something that is so easy to be careless about. And again, it's not that we need to be really uptight and not have, just casual banter with people to make connection. It depends on the motivation, doesn't it? But this is one that we could really get serious about in our lives. Okay, and then there are three of mind, three we create with our mind. Oh, yes, thank you. Environmental result is that crops will fail and it will rain at the wrong time. You will be fearful and have many reasons to be afraid. So if you think about it, at the time of the Buddha, when he was teaching these things, agriculture was a big deal. I mean, it still is today, but we forget where food comes from. We're not involved most of us aren't involved in the production of our own food to a great extent. But these things would be very significant for an agrarian society, wouldn't they? Maybe today the Buddha would give us different your devices won't work, or your computer will have a virus, something like that. Yeah, maybe some of the environmental things would include different kinds of political situations or governmental conditions. Yeah, well, war, yeah. We're not going there. Okay, then having a covetous mind, and it's really important to understand these mental ones. Having a covetous mind, causally concordant results similar to the experiences, you will not achieve your aims. Ouch. The tendency towards great attachment and no contentment. It's kind of rampant in our materialistic society. The environmental result is that all your pleasures will be overshadowed. Oof. So my hope is that you'll go find a really good Lam Rim book and make your own chart, okay? I know you're making notes, and that's fine. But really, and I would suggest reading several books, like Lam Rim Chenmo, the translation of that, but also Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, or Yangtze Rinpoche's text, actually in which volume is it? Volume 2, Foundation of Buddhist Practice. We're just going to be coming up on that, and it may take a while. This is spelled out really nicely. But look at different texts, because different authors, different teachers have slightly different ways of presenting them. Ill will, malice. None of you have that, do you? Causally concordant result in terms of experience is that your surroundings will be terrifying. That sounds like a war zone, but I'm sure there are many other terrifying situations. Will have a tendency towards anger and hostility and harming others. And the environmental result is there will be much war, sickness, and famine. That's an inspiration to clean up our act, isn't it? And the last one is wrong views. So the causally concordant result in terms of experience is that you will be blind to the right view. And, this is considered one of the worst results, because without the right view, we won't have any interest in pursuing our spiritual path. In terms of experience, you'll be blind to the right view. And then the tendency is towards benightedness or confusion, deceit, and bad views. So both of those are very detrimental results. And then the environmental result is that sources of water and precious things will dry up. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, keep in mind that we could also make a chart of the results from all the 10 virtues, and we should do that as well, because we have to balance this out. But this can be inspiring. Hopefully it's inspiring and not depressing. It's inspiring because, as I said yesterday, the Buddha taught this to empower us to take control of our minds and our actions and aim for these better results through creating the causes for them. So hopefully that's inspiring. I think it's important that we hear what you just said, because I'm sure you're not alone.
I just, to hear it all at once and think about all my behaviors over time and this dreariness that I've put out into the world just struck me very hard. Makes me tearful and, ashamed of my behavior. And, I do virtuous things too. I'm not, beating myself up, but it was just when I heard all that at once, it was like, wow, that's a big impact on the world.
Yeah.
I had another question too when you were talking about strength of what you were doing. So do you mean your motivation behind it? So if someone's going to kill someone because they don't like them, or someone's going to kill someone because they're about to kill their child or kill them, I mean, is this the strength you're
There are
talking
many
about?
things that contribute to the strength of an action. And those are spelled out very clearly in the Lamrim text too. So the motivation, the frequency with which we do that action, yeah. If you do it alone, what do you mean? You mean do you encourage others to be engaged in it?
Really not good with the microphone. Well, it's just she said if you did it alone, it has more of an impact. And I said that would make sense just because you're the sole motivator, which implies there was more strength in your own mind about doing it versus being caught up in a moment or influenced by other people, possibly.
Mm-hmm. It depends if we have vows. Interestingly enough, if we hold vows to refrain from those things, the non-virtue of doing them is lighter because we have vows and we know how to purify. It might sound like funny logic, but we know better and we have a method for purifying. Anytime we hold vows, hopefully we know how to purify the transgression and we know how to restore the vow. So I think that's the thinking behind that. Yeah, so many things there that contribute to the strength of an action. Yeah. There's someone over here? Yeah.
Yeah, I was feeling just like you, and I went straight to Vajrasattva to think, what can we do? Because I don't want to stay in the feeling of,
Yeah.
I don't want to go to guilt. So the question is, I've noticed, because I've been thinking on these 10 virtues, 10 non-virtuous actions for a while, and I have seen that they integrate, and sometimes in one moment we can have maybe 2 or 3 of these at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, how do we purify them all together, or is that the reason why there are 3 moments in the practice? The body, speech, and mind, because I have seen that sometimes I am doing something with my body, and at the same time I am using harsh speech, and the motivation is ill will. And that's very scary now, listening to the completion and the strength, and I'm like, oh wow, that's even worse because I have 3 in one moment. So yeah, how is that the way to purify them, or how do we take that to the practice?
Well, I think what you said is a good start. And also, if you read through the practice, we're asking Vajrasattva to purify all our negativities. And although it's beneficial for us to identify something particular and have regret for that in particular, we're also, I think, in general, creating regret for every non-virtue that we've done. So I don't know that it's quite so specific, but you could take each one of them individually and purify them, and then also purify them all together. You could do it all in one session. There are many ways you could do that, I think, purify what you're describing.
One more question. And so is it okay if we say, I want to purify all the times in my life and in previous lives when I used idle talk?
Of course.
While I was with ill will in my mind or angry.
Yeah, why not?
All the times.
Why not?
Okay.
Of course, just one purification session probably won't make a dent, but it's a good start. Yeah, and I hope I haven't raised the anxiety level too much. Oops, maybe I went too far. My motivation was to bring some inspiration, not to bring fear and loathing. Okay, right, thank you. We have Vajrasattva, yes, and hopefully we have some time. And it's also, I know now, it's a good reminder of, we're encouraged to do this practice every night. At least 21 of the long mantra. It takes about 5 minutes to recite 21 mantras. I mean, it depends, but we can get faster. And that's a very good thing to add as part of our daily hygiene. It's our mental hygiene. It's our karma hygiene. And we can do more purification when we have time, like participating in this retreat each year, or just taking a day at home and doing 4 sessions of Vajrasattva where you're reciting for an hour. You can do that, or get together with some friends online and do it. Kathy, you can probably organize that. Okay. Yeah, why not? Okay, so Kathy's thinking about starting an evening Vajrasattva. We'll see. We also there's something called Nune practice, the Chinrezi practice that we do here over Thanksgiving, but it happens at other places at different times. That's also a very good purification. And if you really get serious, we can do 3 months of this retreat, like we did last year here at the Abbey, and that happens in different places around the world as well, like at a lot of the FPMT centers or some of them. So there are many options, but also keep in mind that every time we're engaged in virtue, that also acts as a kind of purification. Lama Yeshe used to say that. Why? Because it's filling our mind with something that opposes the non-virtues. It may not be as powerful as something with the complete 4 opponent powers, but there's a lot that's happening. It's not just black and white or very simple like we can talk about it. Tracy?
Well, I thought you were going to say karmic flossing, since you used to be a hygienist. Anyway, some of these in the environmental, well, many of them look like climate change and, what's happening to the planet. So I get a little confused with people who are very virtuous living in an environment that is so dominated by what look like results from non-virtue. So how do those two get resolved? So.
Yeah, that's a little complicated, isn't it? Anybody else feel inspired? Yes.
So I think my humble opinion, is that beings like His Holiness or some of the High Lamas and very strong Mahayana practitioners have actually made prayers to be born at a time and a space where things are getting rough and people are needing, or sentient beings need support and encouragement and guidance. And so they appear when they're most needed, where they're most needed. So that would be one thought.
I think it's really helpful to understand that karma isn't linear. That if you're a virtuous person and you're living in a famine-driven region, that you are experiencing, that they have to match up, that what you're experiencing in this life, the causes were created in that life. You can't, it's not like immediate. So you may be someone who's living right now and experiencing the fires in Australia, and you're a worker trying to save the koalas. You're experiencing the fire, but the causes for you being there and how you relate to the experience is the bigger issue. So if you're in a place that has a lot of struggles and strife, but you're using it to grow your compassion, to extend yourself and your fortitude, it certainly, not only does it ripen the karma for you, but it also creates the cause for you to be able to have that kind of mind in no matter what circumstances in the future. So it's kind of a wisdom mind to understand that the strife and the difficulties that come with life don't necessarily have to be seen as a punishment or a ripening, but to use it to grow the qualities that we need so much to be able to live in this world as bodhisattvas in the future. Sometimes we had a conversation with one of the members of our community a few weeks ago, and it's like, well, we want to be bodhisattvas, but when we know what's going on with this planet, there's this little part of me that goes, do I really want to come back here? But if I'm going to be a bodhisattva who's setting that bodhicitta motivation, I have to be able to come back and say, no matter where I am needed, I will go. So we need to just open our perspective on how we see difficulties in the world.
Just briefly, it's easy to look up far from us and see great disparity or distinction. But even in your home community, on one side of the river, people will live 15 years longer than on the other side of the river. And that's in Spokane. And so just looking internally, in small communities, the disparity and so forth, and by virtue of who was born into what home, and there's such great variance. I think it's important, it's easy to look afar from ourselves in our communities when in actuality there's a multitude of karmic ripenings in our backyard.
So one of the things that I've heard Venerable Rabina Corbin say is about the power of living in vows, and like one of the reasons a person takes precepts is that the way that she explains it, if you have two people in the same room and neither of those people are actually killing at this time, the person who's taking a vow, has taken a vow or taken a precept not to kill, is actually accumulating merit, while the other person is not. Could you speak to a little bit about that? Is that a correct understanding?
That's my understanding of that situation. So, in a way, it's a really good deal, isn't it? Just having the intention to hold the vow, and then, of course, making effort to hold the vow, whether we're sleeping or going about our business, we're accumulating the merit of refraining from that non-virtue, even if we're not in the action of actually refraining. For someone without a vow, they would only accumulate that kind of merit if they're in the action of refraining from doing the non-virtue. Yeah. There are some benefits. Okay.
Maybe it's a silly question, but why is taking intoxicants a precept and it's not in this 10 non-virtuous list? Because I think it's very important to, I would include it, but I would add it, but
well, it's not a natural non-virtue, is it? It can lead to non-virtues, but drinking in itself is, I mean, I guess it depends on your motivation, but drinking itself, taking intoxicants is not a natural non-virtue. That's my understanding. Yeah. But it loosens our mental faculties and then leads to all sorts of problems. So, yeah. Okay. So let's start walking through these and just talk about some of their characteristics and see what comes up. So the first one is the non-virtuous path of killing, so taking life. And although this is talking about killing, we could also include any kind of physical bodily harm to others, but specifically it's talking about killing. Harming another intentionally. And so there needs to be a recipient of that action, and so it needs to be another living being. Now that's interesting, isn't it? To say another living being or a being other than yourself. So suicide is not a full path of action. It's a strong action, but it's not a full path of action. So as I mentioned, the recognition needs to be unmistaken. So, for instance, you intend to kill a particular person or a particular mosquito or whatever the case may be. That's one strong, clear recognition, unmistaken recognition. But you could also have this general recognition of, I'm just going to kill all the mosquitoes that come into my room, or whatever the case may be. So you have an intention to kill. It's not accidental, This is good to keep in mind. Sometimes people go into such anguish when they've accidentally killed something. Of course, we have regret for their suffering, but we haven't had the intention to kill, so it's not an action of killing. And the affliction can be any of the three. We can kill out of anger or attachment. You can probably think about different situations where that'd be the case. We can kill out of ignorance. To this day, there are ceremonies, or I don't know if that's the right word, but there are, what would you call them? Rituals, yes. Rituals in countries like Nepal where they slaughter thousands, hundreds of thousands of animals out of ignorance, thinking that that's a virtuous thing. So obviously the action is actually killing. Well, maybe it's not so obvious. Or getting another to kill. Isn't that interesting? We accumulate the same non-virtue if we instigate the killing. And then the final step is the other person dies on account of that action. They die before you do. Sometimes it's said that way. So the other person dies. Now, what if the other person doesn't die? Well, it's still a pretty negative action, but it's not a complete path of action. The seed it puts on your mind stream will not have the same strength. as if it was a complete path of action. So you can see there's a whole spectrum of actions that would fall underneath this particular non-virtue. Recently, I got a message from my brother, and he said, this friend of ours was taking us to the airport, and a squirrel ran out into the road, and she accidentally ran over it and killed it. And she's just torn up about this. Would you please make prayers for the squirrel? And I thought that was so wonderful that he would think to do that. And so I wrote back and I said, of course we'll make prayer. That's the squirrel that's on the prayer list. I said, of course we'll make prayers for the squirrel and for the woman who hit the squirrel, because she's torn up about it. And so he conveyed this to his friend, and then she wrote back to him and said, please thank your sister for all the prayers. And he wrote back to her and said, I know my sister would say, you know, you need to be kind to yourself. You didn't do it intentionally. And the squirrel had some karma involved in the situation. I thought, so I wrote back to him and I said, you've been listening, haven't you? He's not a Buddhist. That was nice. Okay, the second one is taking what hasn't been freely given. In other words, stealing. But isn't that a nice way to phrase it? Taking what has not been freely given. So this involves any possession that's owned by someone else that hasn't been freely given to us. So again, the recognition is we're looking at a particular thing that we want that hasn't been given to us, but we want to steal it. That's the motive. And we can do that out of ignorance, thinking it's okay, there's no problem. Or that we're doing it out of attachment. I want to have that. Or out of anger. I don't want you to have that. One of the reasons that we ask people not to go into our kitchen and help themselves to things is because it's a very strong non-virtue to take what's not freely given from the Sangha. So we do freely give the meals and the teas and the things like that, the fruit that's out. But the things in the kitchen, even for us, is not freely given. And so before we can go in and take something, we need to talk to the kitchen manager or someone on the kitchen team. So it's good to be really mindful about those things.
Does that not include borrowing then too?
Borrowing.
Taking what's not really given.
Yeah.
Ask for it.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, what's your intention? Well, permission is a... Yeah. Yeah.
I come into the kitchen and take a glass.
Venerable Tarpa has something to add. There's the microphone.
48 vows, so we get into a lot of detail on this. And there are situations or commentary on our vows where if you have like a friend and you know that they wouldn't mind if you borrowed something and that's considered okay, actually. But you have to be real clear on that. So you can borrow things, but borrowing isn't stealing. So if you don't have a relationship with somebody, you just take something of theirs, I wouldn't really want to call that borrowing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's time limited, but it also, in the way our vows are written, the way that they explain it, you actually have a relationship with somebody, and they know that they wouldn't mind, kind of thing. We have some situations around that about borrowing somebody's robe or something. It's one of the vows. So the general idea is that, like if we wear the same kind of size of shoes, and I know that she's got to walk over there, going to walk to between two buildings for like 5 minutes. She probably wouldn't mind, would take wear my shoes if she knew I wasn't going to need them. And, that's borrowing. You put them right back.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, think about it for a moment, and when you get clear, then please bring it up. I have seen around this vow that, this non-virtue that, for instance, if we're with our family and we know our family would offer us anything, then we can take things. But does that mean we can go into our mother's purse and just take whatever we want? Probably not. Well, okay, so how do you draw the line there? Yes, when kids take money from your purse, they have no intention of paying you back. Yeah. So, if we stop for a minute and think, would this person mind, and really check up clearly about that? And if we have a doubt, we should just ask the person, do you mind if I borrow this? What's wrong with that? Then we're clear. We don't have that doubt in our mind.
Probably say no.
Well, okay, if we think the person would probably say no, then we shouldn't be borrowing it, should we?
Right.
So there's your answer, or there's one answer. Yeah. So the action is taking or getting someone else to take it for you. What I think is so interesting is to see where we draw the line with each of these. I'm pretty sure that none of you would kill a human being. Although in this day and age, what if someone close to you asked you to pull the plug or asked you to help them with suicide? There are some slippery slopes here that we need to think about ahead of time in case we get into those situations. But where do we draw the line, especially those of you who are new to learning about these vows? Okay, you wouldn't kill a large animal, but maybe you'd kill a mosquito still, or a cockroach in your kitchen, or a spider. We have lots of containers around the Abbey for taking insects outside, so please use them. So it's important for us to investigate, where do I draw the line? Can I keep this 100%, or where am I in my progress? What if I had termites in my house? What would I do? Given what we know about this karmic action, what would we do? So it's not always black and white, and it's not always easy. But what about taking what's not freely given? All of us have an obligation to pay taxes, and so we just check up to see how are we doing on that. Are we paying our fair share? Or maybe we borrow things and we have no intention of returning them, or we feel entitled to things. I think people who work for an employer might often have this idea of, well, I work so hard for them, they owe this to me. And so you don't mind making personal calls at work or taking things home. I mean, if they give you permission to do that, fine, no problem. But, really checking up and noticing the difference when we keep our ethics squeaky clean, the difference in our own integrity and the way we feel about ourselves. Also, it creates a certain kind of trust when we have really strong, clear ethics in our mind. People know where the boundary is with us. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Let's talk about unwise and unkind sexual misconduct. Yeah, okay. Basically, this is talking about adultery. So if you're in a relationship, then going with someone, having sexual relations with someone, even though you're in a committed relationship, or someone else that you're interested in is in a committed relationship, and you go ahead and have relations with them anyway. This gets us into all sorts of problems, doesn't it? There are movies and books and tabloids all about this kind of activity, and how many people are harmed as a result. So again, the recognition is unmistaken. If we haven't, well, let's not talk about that with this one. Unmistaken recognition. We have a wish to have sexual relations, and we can do that mostly it's out of attachment, isn't it? But there could also be times where the motivation is anger or maybe ignorance. We don't understand the danger or the difficulty or the damage that's being done. It got very quiet in here all of a sudden. And Venerable extends this to really thinking about how to be a wise and caring sexual being. Of course, as lay people, you're going to, I imagine you're going to continue having sex, but how can we do that with a lot of care and intention for, not only for fulfilling our own desires, but for really thinking about the people that we're engaging with and taking them into consideration. So taking care not to transmit sexually transmitted diseases, if that's a possibility, really being wise about our sexuality.
What does you always hear adultery with sexual misconduct, and you had mentioned in killing that other violent actions can fall under this. Does rape fall under killing versus sexual misconduct, or kind of?
Rape would be sexual misconduct unless that person, well, it might be both if that person's killed during
Okay,
action.
but yeah, like I say, it's usually just
Yeah.
mentioned it's adultery.
Yeah, there's a
and
whole
then-
spectrum, and in the Lamrim, there's a whole spectrum that's described. And just if you go to the Lamrim and read those descriptions, just keep in mind that a lot of these descriptions are culturally based. You know, a lot of these things were written centuries ago in different cultures, and so we need to think about how can we update this to our culture and this day and age, but also apply it to our lives. Yeah. See, I did it. I've got 1 minute left. There's a lot that can be said about that, but this is just an overview. Okay. Yeah.
On tibetanchildren.org, I think the commentary Venerable gave in 1993-94 in DFF has a nice commentary to the 10 non-virtues that gives more modern examples of these.
Wonderful.
But also, I remember when Venerable was teaching this, I asked about the ripening result of harsh speech, because it's like, cliffy environments and jagged landscapes, and that's part of what draws people to go to New Zealand on tourism. Like, so is that a negative ripening result? Because people are very happy to be there and it's very beautiful. And she said that for those people there, it wouldn't be, but there would be other situations perhaps where that kind of environment is a hindrance. So it's also that it's like how you're experiencing that environment is. I just found that interesting because it's like I could see resistance in my mind. It's like where I lived, there was such an appreciation for what was on the paper being said that this is a negative thing, where that kind of didn't line
Maybe
up.
that answers
Yeah.
Tracy's question. Thank you. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Back to killing, it's not a complete action if you eat meat, but for me it's always difficult, this part, because if I intentionally go to Safeway to get meat, I have the intention that somebody actually will kill for me an animal so I can buy the meat I need. Or even sometimes for special days like Christmas, you go into a butcher shop and then you order whatever animal you want to have. So you have the intention there to ask somebody else to kill for you.
Okay. And how I've heard that explained is that there are, it's not like we are saying to the butcher, please go out and kill for me. Now, in some shops, that may be the case. Or you have a friend who likes to fish and you say, please bring me something. That's different. But, and this may seem like splitting hairs, but this is one of the benefits of having these 10 non-virtues spelled out so clearly is that it's not killing to go to a store and buy meat, because we don't have any intention of killing that animal ourselves, and there's enough of a, yeah.
You're asking Safeway to kill, or Safeway to order somebody else to kill.
If we weren't buying it, enough of us weren't buying it.
If we weren't buying it, the animal wouldn't be there. I agree. And what's that? It's not direct. Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. It's not direct. So this would be a good thing to debate. And we're going to have dinner now, and you can have lots of conversations about this. So again, it might sound like splitting hairs, and it's not to say that there's no fault in eating meat. There is, because we're eating the flesh of another being that being would want to have themselves. But I take your point, and that's not how I've heard it explained by many teachers. So. No, it's not a complete path of action.
No, but this is a problem why people eat meat.
If you're interested in vegetarianism, see Venerable Jompa. Veganism, even veganism, yeah, and environmentalism. Okay, so we'll finish there for today. So again, all of these teachings, they're intended to help us. So think about the purpose. What is the purpose of these teachings? It's not to scare us. It's not to make us feel bad about ourselves or depress us, not at all, but rather to empower us to change our lives, to transform our actions, our thoughts and our actions, so that we can bring about the changes that we want, get the results we want, and also so that we can help others do the same thing. So it's our responsibility to learn these descriptions of karma. Okay.